in Excel, when you start creating some spreadsheets that you may want to share with others, you want to be able to make sure that the person that you're sharing it with follows particular rules as to what kind of data goes in various cells. So to require certain data, specific data to go into a cell, you set up some data validations. And the validations are just rules that apply to a cell. You can build very simple conditions. It has to be greater than the value of 10. You can be more specific and say it has to be a whole number. You can specify if it has so many decimal places. There's all different ways to do different validation settings. Once you do a setting, you can create an input message, and that input message guides the user and the message should tell the user what kind of data should go into that cell. And then if you want, you can put in a message alert, an error message, that if the user does not follow the rules, then a message box pops up and explains to him what he did wrong, and he should be able to fix his error. So let's do, and in addition to setting up validation rules like that, you can also create lists, which is just a simple drop-down list for the cell, and then the user, instead of typing something in each cell, he just clicks in the cell, clicks the drop-down arrow, and selects from the list. So we're going to do a little bit of both today. All right, first, we have here a company's product inventory. And we have the value for the various products that are in inventory in stock. So if you notice, the in stock, we have a couple values that are negative. Well, that shouldn't be. You either have the value in stock or you don't. So let's make sure that the user doesn't put in a negative number. Let's also make sure the person who's entering values into this cell doesn't put a decimal place, because there's no such thing as 1.5 t-shirts or a half of a stuffed animal. So I'm going to go ahead, and you begin by selecting the range that you want to create the validation rule for. And your validation rules are always on data, and over here in your data tools you have data validation. So let's just select the data validation. Okay, the first thing we should do is go to the settings. Data validation has 3 tabs: settings, input message, and error alert. All right, for this example, we want the user to be allowed to only enter whole numbers, and we're going to say we want the data to be greater than 0. Okay? Now, I'm not going to click OK right now. I'm going to go ahead and put an input message to help the user understand if they put a different value in, what happened, to help the user put the correct value in. So this is real simple. You just put in a title, and we're just going to say, here's the current stock value. Excuse me. All right, and then we'll put a message. So say the number must be positive. All right, click OK. Okay, so if I click in any cell that has that in the range that we built that data validation rule, now you see the input message that appears. If you don't want to see that, you just click anywhere else besides one of those cells. All right, so the nice thing about this is once we set up the rules, now let's have Excel check it. Are there any values currently in this spreadsheet that violate that rule? So we can come up here to data validation and say circle the invalid data. And if I take a look at my range, I have 2 values highlighted. Sure enough, both of those are negative numbers. How can you have a negative number in a stock? Okay, so I'm going to come here in the cell, and I'm just going to delete that value. And I'm going to come down here and delete this value. And if you notice, my circles don't go away. So you're saying, well, wait a minute, I've got rid of my negative numbers. Why are my circles still there? Well, the other rule we stipulated was the value has to be greater than 0. So in order to get rid of that validation, we're going to have to enter a value more than 0. So theoretically, it should have said, our rule should say greater than or equal to 0, because you can have 0 in stock. But I'm just going to follow along with this example to show you what happens. So if I now come up to this cell and I say, oh, we have one green beach towel in stock, and I hit enter, voila, the circle goes away, okay? But if I come down here and I really have 0 entered, now look, it tells me, oh, I tried to put 0. I didn't have an error message created. So if the data entry that you're putting in actually violates the rules, Excel will say this value doesn't match the restrictions. So we're going to have to click and say retry and delete that, okay? Now, to get rid of the circles, all you need to do is, I'm sorry, let's click in here. All you need to do is, you would have just clicked clear the validation circles, okay? All right, so that is creating a rule and how you violate the rule. Let's go move on to lists. And lists are really nice because instead, especially if you have long entries to be entered into a variety of cells, let the user select from a list. Okay, when you're creating a list, you can set the list up in another spreadsheet, or you can type the values in themselves. We're going to do both. So first of all, we're going to create a list for these the cells in the department. And I have those already set up here in my validation list worksheet. So here's my departments. I either have the apparel, health aid, and gifts. Now, when you're creating a list, it's a good idea to have your list alphabetically. So I've highlighted these 3 cells, and I'm just going to go sort A to Z. And now you see that it switches from, and it puts the departments in alphabetical order. Okay, I'm going to come over back to inventory, and I'm going to select the cell values for my department, which is in C5 through C29. Okay, now I'm going to come up here to data validation, and I'm going to come to settings. Now, my data validation criteria, I'm going to allow values in a list. And I'm not going to type them in because they're already typed. They're actually on another worksheet. So I'm going to collapse this dialog box, and I'm going to click on the worksheet that has my listing, and I'm going to highlight the cells that contain the list. I'm now going to expand my dialog box and click OK. All right, now we didn't put any input message. We didn't put any error alerts. But let's just click here and let's say, okay, the t-shirt is an apparel. The beach towel is an apparel. The magnet is a gift. The pens are gifts. We'll keep selecting these. Okay, and if we come down, and the insect repellent is a health aid, and so is cough syrup. So it really helps the user, easy to put the same value in, and it's also consistent. All right, now this next one, list, we're going to go ahead and type in the list. So let's come to contacts, and what we want to do is type in the list of titles for the people here in our contacts. Okay, so I selected the range. I'm going to go to data validation. I'm going to allow a list. This time I'm going to type it in. So my 3 listings are, a person can be an intern, no space, a manager, comma, no space, and a representative. Okay, now if someone violates this, I want to provide an error. I'm going to provide an error that says warning, and I'm going to sit there and say wait with a little exclamation point and say please select from the list. And click OK. All right, so my second person listed in this group is an intern, so I'm going to go ahead and choose and update him as an intern. The next person, though, oh, I'm sorry, he is a staff. So that's not there. I'm going to type staff and hit enter. So if you notice now, here's the difference between setting a rule and a list. In a rule, I can't enter any data that violates that rule. But here it's telling me, do I want to select from the list? If I say no, it brings it back, and I would delete that and put in intern, manager, or staff. But in this example, I do want staff, so I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. It will proceed to put it in there and accept it. All right, and then the last person here is a manager. All right, so that's how you can do some validated data validations with either specific rules or creating a list.